Hello, everyone. So I'm Karlis Lakševics from University of Latvia, also part of this consortium. Today we have in a consortium talked about discrimination quite a few times, but today I think I would like to try to put some things together in terms of how it happens in Riga and what are the major narratives, both of discrimination and inclusion, and what kind of policies are out there, and what we kind of would expect to introduce in regards to discrimination, because the situation is quite complex. Let's say, let's state it like that. So yeah, I will start a bit with Riga context. Then I would like to actually address discrimination in terms of geopolitics, because especially in current situation of Eastern Europe, the kind of sentiments of acceptance of refugees or not, at least in Latvia, is very much related to that, as well as history in general. So there is, to counter some of the ways of how discrimination spreads is also related to that, in our opinion. And finally, yes, as I mentioned, some of the policies, especially related to the specific kind of local forms of discrimination that we have noted in Riga. So first of all, some tiny things that I think are quite important in regards to discrimination in the housing market in Riga. First of all, it is a settler colonial city, and what that means is that from the kind of historical imagination of many people in Riga, migration is associated with colonization, migration is associated with forms of domination. And in many cases, what this means also, even when people migrants from other countries who do not pose a colonial threat, it is kind of many forces, in many ways, also showed us that. Riga is also a shrinking city, which means that there is a lot of competition of good housing. This doesn't mean that there's a lot of free housing, even though there are empty houses. But this means that that it's quite an interesting and actually very tough housing market. An important part is that only 47% identify as Latvians. This does mean that the dominant sort of nationality in Latvia is actually not fully dominant in Riga. This also sets kind of the scene for the kind of ethnic challenges that relate to how people see migration here. Yeah, it's also a homeowner market. There are actually no large landlords. This is actually important because mostly the rental market is used by informal, let's just say informal agreements, but people who rather have one maybe flat or two flats that they're renting, which means that actually, according to consumer protection rights law, this does not simply apply to cases of discrimination. For larger private company landlords, this consumption protection law applies, and discrimination enforcement is way stronger there. But there are almost this market almost doesn't exist in Riga. So this is this makes challenging discrimination actually way more tougher. And in regards to immigration, most immigration and most refugee requests as well, and the ones that are accepted from the statistics comes from former Soviet countries, which also means that the migration discourse it's also very much related to inner ethnic struggles that have come also from Soviet ethnic policies. Yeah, so going back to my question of what are the major narratives that we have found are part of discrimination in Riga. So first of all, we've been talking at some point at decolonizing narratives and sort of decolonization as a form that actually challenges discrimination. In Latvia, actually, decolonization is a lot of times connected with nationalist movements, which means that people, like their websites who claim to decolonize Latvia, which are very strongly against migration, against also acceptance of refugees. So this is kind of important in that sense that former colonization, especially in regards to Russia, is seen as something that the decolonizing narrative of Latvia can go up to expelling of citizens in Latvia, which are seen as a threat, especially in relation to Russian imperialism. And in the current situation, these narratives have become quite stronger, as you can imagine, in the war, regarding the war in Ukraine. And there's a lot of people from Russia who also have come to Riga. We have a very significant, for example, Russian independent media hub that has been created in Riga, which some people also find troubling. Some people find it a good thing. Some people find it very troubling. So this also creates, and there are refugees from Russia currently. So this is also affecting that, and the borders, as you might have seen, are more and more getting closed from Russia. In regards to racism, which is another one of the dominant forms of housing discrimination, which I have noticed in many forms, also in the student market. We've recently done a report, and it's not finished yet, but a report on student housing market, student housing experiences and pathways. So what we found that there's a significant difference between international students from Western Europe and international students coming from East Asia and Central Asia, which is mostly works in terms of discrimination. People have, their requests in housing are more or less ignored more, and they have faced a way tougher situation in the housing market, finding flats that they would suit them. And finally, the third thing that we find very seriously now, also in another project where I'm involved, we're piloting Housing First program in Riga, and this also it is very, very hard to find flats, landlords that are willing to rent to former homeless people, even if we have full guarantee of the of it being paid by the municipality and state benefit. So even with this situation, we have noticed a similar kind of discrimination for refugees. Some of you, when you were in Riga, also saw that a social mentor, and there's a state social mentor for every refugee that the state provides, but the NGOs actually do. But the funding comes from state funding. They face the situation that by assisting people and when arranging meetings with landlords, that it can go up to 20 times of actually until you find a flat which possible. And this is a very similar situation with former homeless people, former inmates, and so on. Even if you try to not talk about that, but if you have a program like Housing First and you try to do it in a private market, it works. The current situation, for example, we just started with Housing First. It's very challenging. And on the other side, what we do have is more inclusive narratives, which try to actually go the other way around. For example, a colleague of ours, Dr. Danovska, has described the situation of welcome towards Ukrainian refugees as based on a certain post-colonial political kinship, now especially in Poland and in Latvia, but others that the policy completely shifted around. If it was before very much anti-migration, because it was seen as external threat to the nation states of Eastern Europe, and during the 2015, Eastern Europe was very much against increasing quotas for refugees. Then currently it is taking most refugees, especially in Poland, and within a system that is completely not ready for it, which at the same time is based on some kind of allegiance that is based on experience and the national narratives of regarding Russian imperialism historically. But at the same time, what means that in regards to the policy choices, that this kind of compassion exists, and it can be also in many forms facilitated also in other possibilities that I'll talk in a minute. On the other hand, in regards to what is related to racism, so there are discourses of political liberalism and anti-racist sentiment that welcomes migrants and refugees. There are political parties that get around, let's say, 20% of the votes in Latvia, which is not much, but that gets in the government that do represent these votes. So there is some kind of support to that that also sets up some policies. And for this low-income stigmatization, there are NGOs that are strongly working with humanitarian ideologies in mind that are counteracting this kind of stigmatization that relates to low income and that relates to how landlords, especially who are themselves oftentimes not very wealthy, try to manage their risks. And finally, to think of the practices actually to counter some of these versions of what refugees face in Latvian housing market. So what I mentioned in regards to this nationalist issue, like there are traces in the Ukrainian situation that this possibility to actually hold the welcoming attitudes in regards to seeing Latvia as a part of broader anti-colonial, anti-war struggles. For example, when Syrian refugees came to Latvia, there was very, very little media coverage that was positive, and that really explained the situation. This is something that could really at least be expanded, produced actually, in order to actually see, like currently, the story that those are the same Putin's bombs that were thrown against people in Syria works very well. Before it kind of didn't get to people's ears. And of course, geopolitical changes is actually something that would also change the narrative, but it's also a bit inaccessible at the moment. In regards to racism, we do not have anti-discrimination office, as we just heard in Leipzig, and that would be something that I think is something to look towards to. And I was really pleased to listen to the experience in Leipzig that there are actually possibilities. Even just the complaints and the consultations that are given is important, because currently people actually, there are dispersed sources where they would go to complain, like state ombudsman or certain NGOs that provide support, but it is, doesn't feel like there's a clear path where to express that you were discriminated. In regards to, and I think also a way bigger also anti-racist training in all kinds of fields, because in Latvia there's very little of this happening. Even in the university where I am, trying to do something of that kind in our department, but it's very rare, and we do know actually some colleagues' departments where there is racism there. So there's this is something to be also provided here, as you don't find it actually in Latvia very much, as at least that I've done in Germany, for example. And finally, in regards to low-income stigmatization, of course, the state municipal guarantees is some kind of a key at many moments in order to provide some kind of strong safety feeling for the landlords, who themselves often feel that they do not, it's not a big business for them. but we see that that's not enough, even in situation, for example, the Housing First shows that. So it's also a question of very much about labor market, very much about more rapid integration in there, as was mentioned also in the previous presentation about the labor market being the one also with discrimination. So this is also the case in Riga, and if you can make more rapid the transition of a bit higher income and have more clear housing benefits and all that. So this is also possibility to counter discrimination, but in this case not in a very material terms, not ideologically in that sense, but with policy. All right, so my time is over as I see it, so I don't think I have time for questions, but we can save it for discussion later.